Everybody needs to hear that.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Saki. 皆さんこんにちは、Saki です。Oh my god, I'm so excited to share this video with you. Why? Because I've learned a lot from making this video. So for this video, I'm collaborating with Cambly, as you probably already know, which is an online English platform where you can take online English classes with native English speakers. As many of you probably know, I used Cambly when I came here, and Cambly has been one of the big resources for me to improve my English. And today's video is about the tips to get our English better and better. I threw a couple questions to the teachers because I, as an English learner who is in intermediate to advanced level, hopefully, have been constantly trying to find a way to get my English better and better. Even though I use English every single day for my work and I don't find any struggle in the daily conversation, I still want to make my English better. I know that I cannot be a native speaker, but also why not? We can try, right? So for this time, I specifically chose a teacher who has a teaching certificate, plus has an experience on more than 100 chats. And you can also see those information on the main page when you search for a teacher. I actually have talked to several people, but one teacher taught me a very important and a fundamental idea in language learning for me and also for you. His name is Mark. He's in Spain right now, but he was born here. And he was teaching Spanish in America, and then he is teaching English in Spain as well as being a teacher on Cambly. I had my idea of what a language learning could be, which was actually almost the same as what Mark talked to me, but hearing them from a professional makes a total sense, and I think there's so many things that you can learn from him. First, I asked the differences between people who can learn English very fast and then people who don't. And we ended up talking about 1, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. 2, are the vocab and the grammar important? And 3, why English is the hard language to learn. I was actually gonna make a video for the people who are in intermediate to advanced level, but I think it speaks to everybody in any kind of level. I also found a couple of interesting words and expressions from our conversation, so I will explain them in Japanese later in this video. I think you can also see how I expand my vocabulary from them, so hopefully it helps you. So let's dive into it.
So what I would love to ask you is, what is the difference between people who are good at improving their English at a very rapid speed and then who are not, even though they had the same experience or same amount of lessons that they have?
It's a really good question. The difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Extrinsic motivation can be really important, right? Because if someone needs to learn English to, for their job, if they need to earn more money or whatever, obviously that's going to be a motivating factor, but I feel like it can only motivate you so far. If you're intrinsically motivated, if there's something that drives you on a personal level that maybe even is hard to explain to someone else, that can be such a big driving force to help you. But the problem with that is you can't just change that overnight, right? So I would say, as far as just what you can do practically, the biggest difference is people's willingness to practice, right? Because you can study all day, you can learn new vocabulary, you can watch videos, you can do these things that help you elevate you mentally, but until you actually get out there and practice, you don't really improve. Because thinking it, knowing the information and actually using it, are two completely different things.
Totally.
And one of the things I tell my students, so I'll actually write this down for you. The price of learning to do something new is being willing to look stupid when you begin.
Everybody needs to hear that. Yes.
This works for instruments, for sports, for talent, for language, for everything. If you're not willing to try, knowing that you will fail and you will look stupid sometimes, you're never going to improve. But that's the price you have to pay. You cannot get to the point where you're good at something unless you put yourself in situations where you will look stupid at the beginning.
I'm trying to make a video to people who is in Japan who wants to learn English, because I know that it's so tough to learn English over there, because there's no, like, we learn a lot of vocabulary, we learn a lot of grammar, but there's few chances to actually talk. So that's why I'm like collaborating with Cambly, and then really let people, like, encourage people to take these classes, online classes, so that they can actually speak.
I've heard that from everyone all over the world. And everybody tells me like, yeah, we focus a lot on grammar and vocab and sometimes listening and reading and writing, but there's just no speaking opportunities ever. And so, which, you know, I understand, because like I said, I am a language teacher, and it's really hard to find opportunities to like offer that practice in class in a meaningful way, because you want to cover more vocab and grammar, because you think, well, if I can teach them more, they can use the language in more ways. But the problem is that doesn't actually work. It doesn't make sense, because if you can't practice what you already know, you can't improve anyway. So it's a really hard balance. And it's a really important balance, because like you're saying, you can't improve unless you practice. But you can't practice unless you know what to practice. So it's really hard to balance that.
So when you started learning Spanish, did you start from grammar?
My opinion is that if you don't have like a foundation with the language, you're not going to learn. It just sounds like gibberish until you have an idea of what's going on. So I actually do think, I feel like this goes against what most people think of when they think about language learning, but I think it's really important to have some kind of basic understanding of a language before you start to learn it. Otherwise, it won't make sense. The process that works best for me and the way that I teach Spanish is that I teach a concept and then we practice. And then I teach a new concept and then we practice. And so it's like that. You learn something and then you practice something new. And after a while, you do start to pick up new things on your own. But your brain has to learn how to do these things before it can pick up on its own. I do think that grammar aspect is really important. I think a lot of people downplay that, like, oh, why are we learning grammar? We should be like just practicing. But I've just found, at least for me, that doesn't work. So I always start teaching, even my Spanish classes, I start teaching in English and I slowly work my way to Spanish. Because if I do all Spanish, like, okay, I'm exposing them to it, but they're not understanding what I'm saying. What good is this really doing?
Exactly. Oh, I completely understand. Like, there's so many like discussion about English learning education in Japan, because they focus on a lot of readings or grammars or blah blah blah, and then people argue that that is the reason that they cannot speak English. But I actually think that because I had that foundation, I was able to grow my English so fast after coming here.
For sure. So, I mean, it's really, really important, but it's equally as important to practice it afterwards. So the problem is we just can't find that balance. And it's really hard because we have limited time, right?
Right.
That's why actually Cambly is good, because it allows you to practice on your own time as much or as little as you want.
One last question. Is there any particular things that people are struggling when they're in like intermediate to advanced level?
I mean, I don't speak a lot of languages, but I feel like you could definitely speak to this as somebody who had to learn English. People ask me, okay, which is more difficult, Spanish or English? And I tell them, Spanish has a lot of rules that you have to learn at the beginning. But once you learn those rules, it's consistent all the way through. So it's like, it's awesome. It takes a lot to learn it, but once you learn it, like, you're in the clear, you're good. And English is the exact opposite. So English at its most basic level is extremely simple. Not easy, but simple, right? So that's why like everyone who's taken some amount of English class can put together very simple basic sentences, because it's a very simple language. It has very few rules. However, the problem is once you learn those rules, English never follows the rules. So it's like, it like sucks you in with like, hey, come over to our language. We only have a few rules that you have to learn. But then when you learn them, it's like, okay, now forget everything you know. From now on, you have to break all of the rules. So there's no phonetic consistency at all.
Yeah.
There's no consistency with past tense, right? You would think that you could just add ed to the end and it would make it past tense, but there's so many words that
Oh my
that's
God.
not the case. Yeah, it's terrible. In spoken English, I feel like we have just broken the language. English speakers have.
Oh, definitely. Oh, hell yeah, yeah.
Because we don't follow the rules either. Like, we know the rules. I had a guy ask me the other day, he's like, okay, how come in English when you tell stories in the past, you flip back and forth between past tense and present tense?
Yes.
And I was like, I didn't even realize that we did that, but you're totally right. And I don't know how to explain it because you're right. It should be past tense.
Right.
So why do we tell stories in the present tense? And why can we tell the same story and we flip back and forth between the two? There's no reason for it. It's just how we do it. And it makes it really difficult for somebody trying to learn.
I didn't notice that actually. I think that's
So like
weird.
if I told you a story, if I said like, so yesterday I went to the store and I saw this guy and this guy comes up to me and he says, hey, how are you? And like, those are this story is happening in the past. Why am I using past and present together?
Right. Oh, that's such a great point. Yeah, I think you're so right.
So I think English itself is a language that breaks all of its own rules. And then English speakers break all of the rules that are already broken, right? So people, and this is America, the UK, Australia, we all do it in different ways, but we all do it. And so it becomes very difficult unless you focus on one and you start to learn the ways in which we break the rules. It's very difficult to learn, I think.
Oh, definitely. That actually reminds me of like when I first came here, I was actually not too struggling with the English itself, but I was struggling with the culture. English language connects to the culture so much. That's why I was like, it was so hard to me to like speak or talk to people. So that totally makes sense.
And you're in New York too. I mean, New York has a very specific culture and a very specific English as well. And so I think it would be I don't know. I mean, there's so many people, so obviously you're gonna hear different kinds, but I think just walking through the street, it's so casual and it's almost like angry, like passive aggressive anger, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very lively city, but for learning English, oh man, I just feel like it would be difficult.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That was very useful. I'm so excited to edit this video and then share it to everybody.
Right.
はい、いかがでしたか？面白かったですか？ I personally find it so compelling and it makes me want to take online classes again. 私は2年前ぐらいにオンライン英会話はストップしてしまって、それからちょこちょこしか使ってないので、久々に長期間でちょっとまた続けてやってみたいなと思いました。私が結構いろんな動画で話してると思うんですけど、日本にいた時とか、あとはこっちに来てから最初の1年とかも、海外に来てなんとなく話せるようになる人たちはいっぱい見てきたし、特にニューヨークなのでいろんな国の人がいて、なんとなく英語を話してる人はたくさんいるんですけど、私はそれ以上にちゃんと使える、仕事で使える英語を身につけたかったので、喋れる、伝わるレベルの以上のレベルに行くまでにはどうしたらいいのかっていうのを今までもずっと考えてきたし、今も考えています。日本の中で多分いろいろ今英語の学習の方法があっていろいろ議論されてると思うんですけど、その中には単語ってどれぐらいやったらいいんですかとか、グラマーってどれぐらいやったらいいんですかとか、本当に日本の教育は役に立ってるんですかっていう声をすごくよく聞いて、私もそういう悩みを持っていたこともあったんですけど、でも私がこっちに来てから特に毎日英語を使わなきゃいけないようになって、仕事で使うようになって思うのは、私の場合はやっぱりその基礎があったからこそポンって英語が上手になった気がしています。もちろん人それぞれいろんなやり方があるけど、もし今そうやって自分のやってることが役に立つのかなって悩んでる人がいたら、絶対大丈夫だよっていうのは伝えたいです。今やってることが絶対長期間で良くなっていく。マークも言ってたように、英語ってやっぱり一回ルールを覚えてもそれがどんどん ん会話の中で崩れていったりとか、もうとにかくいろんなルールがあるから、だからこそインプットが大事だし、文法をしっかり勉強してその段階に行ってやっと文法から離れることができる、いい意味でっていうのを、個人的な経験としては感じています。そう、面白い表現がいくつかあったので紹介しますね。一つ目は putting yourself out there っていう表現があるんですけど、これはねすごく私はよく聞きます。例えば YouTube やってることを友達に言ったら、なんか Oh, I'm so glad that you're putting yourself out there とか、なんかこうどうやって日本語で表現したらいいのかな。感覚としては自分自身を out there 外の世界に置く、あえて自分がいろんなことを受け取ったりとか見られるような状態に自分を置くみたいな感覚ですね。なんか out there っていうのは自分のコンフォートゾーンのアウトサイド、外の世界とか、自分の殻を破るみたいな感覚にちょっと近いかもしれない。これはすごくよく使います。もう一つ目は priceっていう言葉ですね。プライスっていう言葉自体は値段とか多分皆さんが普通に聞く言葉だと思うんですけど、今回どういう風に訳そうかなっていうのを考えていて、それでこの単語の勉強の仕方皆さんにシェアできるなと思ったので、ちょっと軽くシェアしますね。まずプライスっていうのを英英辞典で調べてみますね。そしたら例えば The amount of money expected required とかいうのもあれば、もう一つの意味 An unwelcome experience, event or action involved as a condition of achieving a desired end。だからこの値段の意味の他にももう一つこういう例えば犠牲とかそういう意味にもなります。なんとなく多分聞いてわかると思うんだけど、じゃあ実際に犠牲を英語でどう言うのって聞かれた時に price ってなかなか出てこないですよね。犠牲って聞くと多分 sacrifice を思い浮かぶ人もいると思うんですけど、じゃあここから sacrifice と price の違いは何なのか。でこれを例えば私は Google で price vs sacrifice differenceで調べてみて、例えば price は the cost required to gain possession of something、 sacrifice は is the offering of anything to a god。 キリスト教とすごく英語はつながっているので、そういう感じのデフィニッションになると思うんですけど、例えば犠牲という同じ言葉でも sacrifice を使うとどっちかというと何かをギブアップしなきゃいけない。でも price を使うともっと何かを得るための交換みたいな意味とか、そういうふうに私はずっと今まで、ボキャブラリーを増やしてきました。これって実は単語の量そのものは増えないんですけど、でも日本語の細かいニュアンスを英語で伝えるにはこういう勉強のやり方がいいんじゃないかなと思って、私はこれをずっと続けています。私の英語を聞くと多分大して難しい英語を言ってないんですよ。でそれが私の問題でもあるけど、日常生活では特に何ももう問題がなくなってきたので、ずっとこんな感じで続けてて、次はもっとねかっこいい言葉をどんどん増やしていかなきゃなってちょうど思ってるところなんですけど、皆さんもぜひ簡単な単語のイディオムを覚えていくっていう風に勉強すると、多分言いたいことの幅がどんどん広がると思います。はい、もう一つは Gibberish っていう言葉ですね。ちんぷんかんぷんっていう風に訳したんですけど、ちんぷんかんぷんって自分がわからないことの他にも meaningless language っていう意味があって、よくわからないライティングとかよくわからないスピーチとかいう時にも使います。はい、というわけで今日はCamblyを使って英語をどうやって伸ばしていけばいいのか、そして面白い単語をちょっと紹介しました。オンライン英会話ってやっぱり話の中にもあったようにインプットするところをアウトプットできる場所なので、日本に特にいる皆さんで英語をもっと伸ばしたいなって思ってる方にはぜひぜひ使ってもらいたいです。今回もCamblyさんが私の視聴者の皆さんのために15分無料のコードを作ってくださったので、ぜひぜひそれをきっかけに軽い気持ちでやってみようぐらいでも大丈夫なので、ぜひその一歩を踏み出してみてください。オンライン英会話を取るのすごく怖い気持ちはわかるので、これを機会に皆さんに挑戦していただければなと思います。はい、というわけでこの動画作るのすごく楽しかったです。皆さんもぜひどう思うか教えてください。こういう風にネイティブの人との会話の中で面白い単語とか表現を見つけていって皆さんにシェアするのも結構私は楽しいなと思ったので、これからも続けていけたらなと思います。Let me know what you think in the comments. Alright, so see you in the next video. Bye!